Let's now create the VueJS project. Navigate to the folder where we need the project and open Visual Studio Code. Let's create an index.html file. Let's add Bootstrap for styling our app. The styling reference goes in the head section of our HTML. And the bundle JavaScript reference can be added at the closing body tag. We will be using the CDN version of VueJS for our front-end project. So let me add the JavaScript reference for VueJS and VueRouter.js files. VueRouter is needed to add the routing capability for our app. We also need to save the API URL somewhere in our front end. So let's create a variable.js file and save the URLs in it. Let's also reference the variables.js file in index.html. We also need to include Axios library, which will be used to consume the API methods. Let's add the routing and navigation to our app. Let's first add a div tag with ID as app and add some headers. Let's see how it looks by opening the HTML file. Now let's add the components or the pages needed for our app. We will add 3 screens. One for home, one for department, and one for employee. We also need a root component inside which we will list the routing paths. Let's add it with name app.js. Let's add a simple template for each of these screens. The HTML is written inside 2 backticks. Let's add the routing paths. /home will be given for home component. And /employee for employee component. /department for department component. Let's create a VueRouter object and pass the routes array. Now let's create a Vue object. This will be mounted to the element with ID app. This is the same ID that we used for our div. Now let's add the navigation menu. Router link is the tag that will help with routing. Let's check if this works. We need to add one more tag called routerView to make this work. Let's add class container to our div. Looks like we have not referenced the JS files. Let's do it. We have not changed the component constant names in JS files. We see that the routing and navigation works as expected. Let's consume the get method and display the data in a grid. Inside data, we can declare all the variables that we can use inside the template. I am declaring an empty array which will be populated using the getAPI method. In the methods section, let's write a method to consume the getAPI method. We are making use of Axios to consume the API methods. Once the response is received, we will assign the data to the departments array. There is a lifecycle method called mounted which will be called when this component is in scope. We will call the refresh method here. Now let's add the Bootstrap table to display our data. We will loop through the department arrays using v for directive. In the options column, we will add two buttons. One to edit the record, and another one to delete a record. Let's add Bootstrap icons inside these buttons. Let's check how it looks. Looks like we missed a closing t-head tag. The grid seems to look fine now. Let's add the Modal pop-up window to add and edit the department. Let's add the modal title from variable since we will be using same modal for adding and editing. Let's define the modal title variable. Also, we need form fields department name and department ID inside the modal. Let's add the text box for department name. The vModal directive gives us two-way binding, so the value entered in the text box will be available in the department name variable. Let's add two buttons, one to create new department, another one to update the department. The Create button will be visible when department ID is set to 0. Now let's add the button to open the Modal window. This button will be to add new department. Same functionality on click of Edit Department. On Add click, we will set the title to Add Department and Department ID to 0. And on Edit click, we set the title to Edit Department. We see that Modal window works as expected. Now let's add functionality to create and update departments using the API URLs. Once response is available, we display the message in alert box and also refresh the grid. Let's test the functionality. We see that the create and update functionalities work as expected. Now let's complete the delete method. We will pass the department ID to the delete function. We will take the confirmation before calling the delete API. We see that delete also works as expected. Let's complete employee details screen. We will copy the contents from department screen and make changes accordingly. The Modal window will now have more form fields and image to be displayed. So let's use Bootstrap Flex. Department field will be a drop-down. The option values will come from departments array. Date of joining will be a date field. Now let's add a div to display profile picture. The image source will come from variables. Let's also add upload button for uploading new images. The photo path is already defined in variables.js file. We will use the same. In refresh data method, we will refresh both employee and departments array. Let's now add method to upload the image. We will attach the first file to form data. Once upload is successful, we will replace the photo file name variable. We see that the screen is now displaying data. Let's check the create and update functionalities. Finally, let's test the delete method. We see that all the functionalities in employee screen work as expected. Let's implement sorting and filter feature. Let's do it for departments table. Let's start with filtering. We need text box to enter the filter text. We will be using department ID filter variable to store the filter text. We will execute the filter function each time new letter is entered. Let's add a filter text box for department name column as well. Along with filter variables, we also add one more array which will store backup data without any filters. Now let's implement the filter function. We will be using includes method to check if the filter text matches with the array data. Let's check the functionality. We see that filtering works as expected. Now let's implement sorting feature. We will add two buttons for sorting. One to sort in ascending, and another one to sort data in descending. If we pass true, it means we need to sort it by ascending. Let's add icons for the filter buttons. Now let's implement the sorting function. Let's check the result. Looks like we made an error while passing parameters. We see that the sorting works fine now.